Hi, I'm Carl Shusterman, and I'm an immigration attorney. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, I worked as a naturalization attorney for the Immigration Service. I interviewed hundreds, even thousands of people that were applying for citizenship in the United States. Men who would be 6'7" would come up to me and I would say, "Let's shake hands," and their palms would be dripping wet because they were so nervous about the whole process. So after all these years of being in private practice, I left the government back in 1982. I thought I'd make this video and give some advice to you about the naturalization process. First thing that I want to tell you is, why bother doing it? You have a green card, you can live and work in the U.S. for the rest of your life, so why bother becoming a U.S. citizen? There's a lot of different benefits. You can vote, you can hold government jobs. Maybe a lot of people don't think this is a benefit, but you can serve on a jury. But I think for most of my clients, the reason that prompts them is because it's a lot easier to get your relatives into the United States as green card holders once you're a citizen than when you're a permanent resident. A permanent resident can only apply for their spouse and their kids who are unmarried. But a citizen can apply for their spouse, their married or unmarried kids. They can apply for their brothers and sisters, their mother or father. Just opens all the doors. Although I have to warn you, some of those waiting times are pretty long, but compare the difference. A green card holder applies for his wife, 5-year wait. A citizen applies, they can apply in 1 day. So, I mean, there's a big difference there. Do you qualify for this? Well, there's a series of qualifications. You have to have the green card in general for 5 years before you can apply. But if you're married to a citizen, you can do it in 3 years as long as the person that is your spouse has had a has had citizenship for 3 years, you've been married 3 years, and you're living together. Okay. Also, you can apply 3 months early, so whether you're under the 5-year requirement or the 3-year requirement, always remember to apply 3 months early, but never more than 3 months. If immigration catches you applying even 1 day more than 3 months, they're apt to reject your whole application. There's also a physical presence requirement. You have to stay in the United States at least half of the time, half of the 3 years or half of the 5 years. And you must have a list and be able to prove that you were in the United States at least 50% of the time. If you were out of the United States over 180 days all at once, there's what lawyers call a rebuttable presumption that you abandon your permanent residence, and you have to prove to the immigration examiner at the airport that you did not do so. If you're out of the United States for over 1 year, the general rule is you lose your green card. Now, there are ways that, as a lawyer, we know how to take care of that, and we're not going to get into that in the video right now. Also, you have to be a person of good moral character. It doesn't define those words, good moral character, in the immigration law, but it has a whole list of people who were barred from showing good moral character. Basically, I'm not going to go over the whole list, but if you have a serious crime, you got your immigration by fraud, things like that, you're not going to be able to show good moral character. And the crimes are not always, people think, well, I'm not a murderer or rapist, I had a petty theft and it was expunged from my record, and my criminal attorney says I don't have to mention it. Guess what? For immigration, if you don't mention it, it's fraud, and they're not going to give you your citizenship. It always counts. We had a lady who had, I think she had some kind of substance abuse problem back in the 1980s, but she was so proud because she had cleared up that problem. She was working on her MBA. Her husband was a permanent resident, and she came in to get her citizenship, told the complete truth on her forms. She had 3 petty theft convictions, all expunged. Well, 2 petty theft convictions will put you under deportation proceedings, and she didn't know that because she didn't consult with a lawyer beforehand. So she went in on the big day, all dressed up, really decked out, and the examiner said, I'll be back in a minute. And he comes back with a denial of her naturalization application and a notice to appear before an immigration judge in deportation proceedings. And they started yelling at her. She started crying, came into our office the next day, and we've been defending her for the last couple of years, and it's a pretty tough case. So, you know, those kind of things you don't want to take for granted. Another thing that you have to do is take a test, 2 tests, one in history and government and one in English. Now, the history and government test used to be the easiest thing in the world. Never in the last 26 years has one of our clients ever failed that test. But now there's a brand new test, and instead of asking questions like, well, what are the 3 branches of the government, which I'm sure you all know, they'll ask things like, what is the rule of law? You know, that's kind of a hard question to answer. I mean, even if you're an immigration lawyer, that's a tough one. But I got a solution for you. Go to our website at www.shusterman.com, click on Citizenship, scroll down to our Naturalization section of the page, and I have all 100 questions they're allowed to ask and all 100 answers. So it's important to understand these things, but memorize it for good measure. I mentioned there were 2 tests. The other test is English. You're not expected to be, you know, like a Harvard professor in English, but you are expected to know simple words and phrases in the English language. And in reality, what that means is that the immigration examiner has to be able to interview you in English. There are exceptions. If you're over 50 years old and have a green card for 20 years, or you're over 55 years old and have a green card for 15 years, or some people who are mentally incapacitated in some way may be able to get the test either waived or taken in their own language. But for 99% of the people that are watching this video, you are going to have to take a test in English, and you'll also be made to write a simple sentence in English. You know, I live in a big house, I have 3 children, something like that.